Welcome back to the Nurse Leader Debrief. I'm your host, Amy Trueblood. Today I welcome Jason Schultz, who allows me to call him Jay Schultz. Jay works in Colorado as a shift specialty coordinator, or a position that is equivalent to an assistant nurse manager type of role. Jay and I have known each other for several years. Jay is just a wonderful human being and a wonderful nurse and a nurse leader who brings extensive experience from both the military as well as acute care settings around the world to his role. Jay talks with us a little bit about how he supports his manager, how he supports his team, and the things that are important to him in achieving excellence in his current role, and why it's okay to be okay with staying exactly where you are and excelling in that role. Jay, ready or not, it's time for your debrief. Okay, so do you want me to call you Jay or Jason?
Amy, that is completely up to you. I answer to either. At work, what's crazy is even the youngsters over there are calling me Jay Schultz RN. It for you, Jay, Jason, So it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to have a chance to talk to you on your platform.
I'm honored that you were so willing to do so. I was thinking about this, and can you believe it's been almost 20 years already since we met?
Has it been? It's almost 20. I will have graduated from nursing school 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting close. It's got to be 17, right? We would have met in 2007.
17 on the dot. March 7th, 2007 was my arrival at St. Joe's, and on a medicine unit there. And my travel contract had ended, and you scooped me up for another contract and then scooped me up to be an employee. So been there ever since.
What I think is really interesting is here we are again in a time where folks are trying to figure out how to convert travelers to staff, right? And it is a whole different world with traveling now, I think. But I think that's really funny that from that time that long ago, here we were trying to figure out how do we find the best of the best, which I think travel nursing gives an extraordinary opportunity to organizations to find people who are amazing at what they do, well-traveled, obviously, well-experienced, and can bring some really great insights and into a team. That's what I always thought. That's what I thought about you. We had several that were converted from travelers to staff in that department. So what do you think that was about the work environment there that made you want to do that, to transition?
What was true then, what's true now, is that you better have a joyful working environment if you want to recruit travel nurses who have it. They can adopt your culture, they can adopt your policies and procedures, and they are clinically excellent. And you want those folks, and you better have a joyful working environment. And I heard something recently that really made me do a lot of reflection as a leader, and it had to do with accountability and support. And it's great when you can be in a unit that has high accountability and high support. And if that balances off, the joyfulness of the working environment, it can deteriorate. It can deteriorate acutely. At times, we don't always have that balance, okay? And we have to admit that to ourselves. But I think that when I saw your unit in particular, back then, 17 years ago, there was high accountability, high support to equate to a high standard and excellent outcomes. And that was something that, as I had only been a nurse maybe 3 years when I arrived to you. I was like, this is it. This is what I want. This is where I need to be for my own growth and development.
That's amazing. That's fascinating to me because in my recollection, my intention as the manager of that unit at the time was to hire exceptional people. And that's what I think is so interesting because I can think of several travelers that we converted, but also the nice thing in context for that department was that we were hiring. We were hiring a brand new group of people to come together, right, under one vision and one mission. What I'm so proud of for you and all of the others that have been a part of that department or that organization is that those amazing things continue, right? I've been away from that organization as a whole for almost 10 years already.
You're still thought of as so present. I want to let you know that. We all, you're in our conscience. You're a part of our conscience as we practice, and especially the leaders there, because, And I have to admit, listening to a lot of sports radio, they talk about the coaching tree. Like this coach begot that coach, and that coach was a coordinator for that coach. Well, it's not a it's like that in nursing too. You know, you had this coaching tree that you had initiated, and then that became Crystal DeCola's director, and that became a host of managers out of that unit that you had hired for. Isn't that cool? I think it's a cool deal when I think of my everyday work.
Yeah, I think it's really cool, and I'm just so proud of everybody. I ran into Amanda at the AONL conference recently, and she's just knocking it out of the park. And she reminded me that I was the first to hire her as a manager, and she's just blossomed from there, right? There's just so many, and it is just, I'm so proud. And I know that others are too. I certainly wasn't in those leadership positions by myself. We had tremendous support from our CNO and Wendy and Deb. I mean, we just all worked together really well to have the same standard across the organization. So super proud of all of you. So given that, well, why don't you talk to me a little bit about your entire journey as a human and as a nurse, whatever you want to share.
Goodness. It began in 1998. I'd done a year of community college to placate my parents. And when it came time to graduate high school, of course, I wanted to enlist. They said, no, here's some money, go to the local community college, where I didn't do all that swimmingly because I didn't have a vision. I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I saw the Air Force recruiter, I think, halfway through that first semester. And I walked into the office and said, hey, I know I don't have a degree, but I do want to fly. I want to wear the flight suit. I think it looked cool on Top Gun. And they said, well, but boy, do we have the job for you. And he went into like those V files, like the little file cabinet, and pulled out aerospace medicine, where we have enlisted medics who are educated and trained by registered nurses and experienced medics. And we would work in clinics or in hospitals, collect urine samples, draw blood, start IVs, do a lot of the hands-on nursing care at the direction of a registered nurse. And on occasion, we'd get to be able to jump on a C-130 aircraft and fly patients all around the country. And now, thank goodness, back then, 1998 to about 2000, 2001, we were still in the former Yugoslavia flying operations. Thank goodness I didn't do that. At the time, I wanted to. As a 45-year-old man, I'm grateful I didn't have any combat experience, because I don't know how that would have affected me or stained me. I don't think I would have shied away from it, certainly, but I'm thankful for my experiences. At any rate, the flying, as glamorous as that was, I really found a direction when that came to the nursing care. And suddenly, the chemistry classes I took in high school and the physics I took in community college for that year seemed to make sense. And finally, I could be a student. And it made sense for me to go to nursing school toward the end of my enlistment. And I finished in 2004.
Wow. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your service. And I think that to your point, there's just so much that those of us who have not served in combat will never understand. And I'm so grateful to those who have and who have sacrificed that, but also served in any capacity in the military. I think that's such an important lesson. I certainly have never served. I have a son-in-law who's serving now in the Marines, and just have my utmost respect and gratitude for the courage that it takes to serve, and particularly at that time, that got to be quite a tenuous time as well that you were serving.
Right. I separated from the Air Force in 2004, just after attaining my associate degree in nursing. And I sat on my couch watching, the worst of the worst in Iraq that you can imagine, it was just on our televisions. And I was watching Fallujah happen like in that early winter of 2005. And so then I spoke to an Army recruiter. At any rate, I ended up accepting a direct commission as a second lieutenant in the Army Reserve. And that's when you had met me, Amy. I had gone from being stationed in Albany, New York, and working in Bennington Hospital as a civilian to coming out to you in Colorado and serving in their reserve unit. And then, as you recall, you had to send me to Germany. You hired me, and then you had to send me away for a year. They plucked me up out of active duty there. But I am, and that was another thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me, how did that aspect of your career and your experience impact the trajectory of your nursing?
Well, I think at some point, like when I returned from Germany, I had experienced some real world, real hands-on leadership experience that when I came back to you as a staff nurse in, I think it would have been November of 2008 or 2009, I had just kind of bookmarked it. All right. I bookmarked those experiences, and I started sharing insight at staff meetings rather than being the quiet person in the chair for staff meetings. Started raising my hand and participating more. And this is feedback from Crystal DeCola, by the way, who I admire, who's out of your coaching tree. She saw a lot of participation from me, and then I went to AONE with all of us together in March of what would that have been? March of 2010. I think we all went to AONE in Denver together, and
Gosh,
and I
yeah,
think
it probably was.
and I think at that point we all started collectively thinking about what are we all doing next, and what am I doing next, and I was on that cardiovascular surgery unit for some time when you again, Amy, had approached me. You were director. You left division to become director of medical surgical services, and approached me and said, "Hey, we got a lot of nurses throwing a lot of pain medication at problems up on that ortho unit, and we need some proper clinical insight as to what we can do for these patients rather than BiPAP and Narcan every other night." And I've been there ever since. I got there in June of 2015. I think that is where that kind of brings us. So it'll be 10 years or 9 years soon. Yeah.
Wow, that brought back some memories. That is true. That was what I always admired about you was your clinical expertise. That's something that anybody who's worked for me or with me knows that I have never boasted about. I didn't spend very long taking direct care of patients, and therefore needed to surround my teams and my leadership teams, fill them with people who did, because that at the in my opinion, in the roles that you serve in now, the clinical experience is critically important. The clinical expertise is critically important. I believe firmly as you progress into a manager, director, and whatnot, that it becomes less important to lead areas for which you have clinical expertise. However, I think just patient care in general, because you weren't an ortho specific person, right? Clinically, but you have immense knowledge, clinical care knowledge, and kind of pride yourself on that. Why don't you talk a little bit about the role that you're in now, and describe for people what that means?
Well, patients ask me a lot when I interface with patients. Hey, what's your role here? Are you the charge nurse? And I act as charge nurse, and I'm the supervisor of the floor. I'll tell them. Because our title, our corporate title there at this organization is Shift Specialty Coordinator, which ultimately I answer to the clinical manager. There's a team of 3 of us which cover all aspects of shift work, and we cover the charge nurse role. We find if there are discrepancies in care, we find them. If there are discrepancies in documentation, we find them, and in both cases, we support and coach those up. And we are that knowledge base to whom our young nurses, our new nurses, come to us and lean on. And I remember when I was interviewing for that position, there's an outstanding manager. She interviewed me as kind of like an outside opinion from a different unit. Deb, she asked me a pointed question. She goes, "What is your plan to mentor these nurses and to coach these nurses and to develop these nurses?" And I think or to lead these nurses, she said. And I said, it's actually, for me, it's mentorship through leadership, which is, I think, ultimately why I've landed in this role, because I can lead them through mentorship, through clinical care, through, clinical protocols, through whatever it is these nurses are facing right out of college or university. And I can help them bridge those gaps between learning your time management, applying your theory, and then becoming competent. And then beyond there, if they want to, usually the competent registered nurse starts thinking about their future, right? It's like, okay, I've been on the unit for about 2 years. I'm looking at being something, and then trying to apply their experiences and make them meaningful toward their future.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about that a little bit because right now there's evidence out there to suggest we must focus on honing in on the skills and the development of these nurses while they are with us within the acute
Mhm.
care setting and understanding perhaps this is not going to be a career long move for people. And sometimes I think leaders struggle with that, and we try so hard to keep people in our specific unit that we overlook opportunities to grow them for benefit of other patients or the nursing profession in a different way. How do you look at that? And because you're in an orthopedic department, right? That's not a place. I mean, I guess I don't know. You could describe what your tenure is and how you approach. If it is a place where we're looking at every couple years, people are looking for something else, as you just mentioned. How do you handle that from the beginning with them, and what's your philosophy on that?
Well, I try to identify what they're looking for. I simply ask the questions like, "What are you looking for? What are you looking for out of this?" Because all too often, like our turnover is what it is. As we're a orthopedic, we do see some neurosurgeries, and we do see some internal medicine patients. We're starting to take on a medical cardiac population, but all of this uh, it can be seen as entry level nursing if you're seeing critical care as your end point, or if you want to be a PA or an NP at some point, or you want to work in an ER, or you want to go to a higher level trauma facility. I simply ask the questions, or if I see something in somebody that, hey, what I see in you, I see leadership in you someday. How can I help you to get there? What are you looking for? What do you think you need out of yourself? And I find no offense in the registered nurse who's done their time with me and wants to move on. And I am blessed to have a couple of nurses who have been on our unit. I think they predate my arrival on that unit, and this is their destination. One has been a physical therapist and registered nurse for a combined 20 something years, and orthopedics and human movement is his specialty. And we're constantly looking at x-rays together, and it's almost like he's leading and mentoring me on the clinical side, even though he reports to me on the administrative side. So it's a really neat relationship that I am blessed to have, quite honestly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for that. I think exactly as you and I share a philosophy there on allowing or learning what people want out of their careers, number one, their strength, and just helping them to achieve that and whatever that looks like will ultimately benefit in long-term gain, whether folks are in your specific department ongoing or not. Which brings me to another question, Jay. You've been in a supervisory type of role for an assistant manager type of role, right? That's what you were describing of for 9 years at this point. You mentioned you must hear from folks, "Hey, it's time to move forward into another role." What keeps you in that role, and what are you hopeful to accomplish there? What are the things that you just love about the role that you're in?
Yeah, and I do love the role I'm in. That's important. But I did have a clinical manager experience just at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was really eye opening as to how unready I was for that job. It was I mean, you talk about a blow to the ego that, I'm watching the trajectory of my career. My clinical manager at the time reached out to me and said, "Hey, there's going to be an opening on the oncology unit here at St. Joe's. And we all think that, you're tailor made for it." And I learned pretty quickly. And of course, the pandemic had a say in this as to how we do business. We realigned units to where that managerial position is no longer open. But if it were, I can tell you, I probably wouldn't be in it. I think they would have found somebody better qualified and better at it. So why haven't I moved on? The joke around the office, so to speak, is that the bulk of the census is now at the end of the week. I tell folks, hey, this was a long-term plan. When we were just orthopedics, the census would kind of dive off at the end of the week, and I would just work on handling, the right staffing for the right amount of patients, floating people and staffing and all that stuff. And now that we are really into the wheelhouse of my clinical expertise, I joke with my manager all the time, you can't do without me at this point. And so that's the joke, but it's also the truth that I just really enjoy the evolution of this unit and seeing like, the patient skill mix that's coming in and seeing what these nurses are confronted with on a daily basis. Okay, you've got a knee replacement over here, you have cervical surgery over there, and then you've got maybe a dementia patient here who's it's an acute finding for them, altered mental status, electrolyte imbalance over there, and then you've got congestive heart failure down the hall. That's your assignment. Let's roll. And now I'm really diving into my leadership through mentorship, which is just what I love and why I haven't moved on. Maybe this is my niche. Admittedly, I've done some reflection post-pandemic. I think many of us have had horizons that have gotten cloudy or disjointed during the pandemic, and mine still hasn't totally clarified. But where I am right now is in a joyful working environment where I'm providing high accountability and high support to the nurses that are there. And so I feel as though I am held to a high accountability standard by the leadership I report to. I receive high support from them to do my job. So at the moment, if you were to ask me, well, what do things look like in 5 years? I'm in the I don't know. Which is a really neat space. People sometimes panic. I don't know what I'm going to do. Hey, enjoy that. There's something to be said for it. And so I'm still kind of there. I'm blessed that my wife, her horizon clarified greatly during the pandemic. She's in her third year of occupational therapy school, a doctoral candidate in that, and she graduates in just now 13 months. And I think that's pretty cool. So I'm really just supporting when I'm not in the hospital. I'm supporting her in that role, just getting her education finished up.
It's so amazing, and that's what I just love. I mean, I'm sure this is true in other areas. I've been a nurse leader for 20 years of my 25-year career, and I'm fascinated with the people. That's why we're doing this podcast, right? The people who are serving in nursing leadership roles at all levels, and primarily those that we might consider first line, middle leaders. And so the position that you find yourself in of an assistant manager type, an elevation beyond charge nurse, which is a shift role, right? In most places, some places different, but in most places, yours is a position between that and the manager. And I think the one that's just so most critically important to the staff. And I think somebody needed to hear that today, Jay, which is it is okay to be really good at that role and to stay there. It is okay. I think, I've served in senior director and chief nursing officer roles, and I think I've even found myself constantly pressuring those who are really good at the role like what you're doing right now. Oh, you must go forward, look at this as a manager role. And sometimes that has worked out. The thing is, we know that, even though we also know that preparation for people and support, and I'm sure you had quite an experience doing that at the beginning of the pandemic time frame. Even in general, though, at least from my experience, we haven't always, and I'm guilty of this, we have not always helped to support people in transition from those roles. And there are skills that translate, all skills translate, right? And your knowledge translate. And then there are some for which we need to make sure that we are prepared to provide adequate support. And I'm not sure that I've always done that very well. So it's a good lesson for me. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with being, in fact, it's amazing. I think it's amazing to dedicate yourself to this craft of being the best you can be in the space where you're in, and not knowing what's next, and that's okay. And people like me need to stop in our career roles. I mean, not necessarily today, but stop trying to make people feel pressured, I think, to move beyond that role. If that's where you want to be and you're fantastic at it, stay. As long as until you're directed somewhere else, internally or otherwise. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I think people needed to hear that today.
Yeah. And again, if you're in the I don't know space, just to reiterate what you were saying, be the best that you can be where you currently are. If your horizon is 7 p.m. when you're beginning your shift at 7 a.m., that's all right. That's all right. There's plenty to do between 7 and 7. Plenty to do. As I always say, it's a good day for patient care. You've probably heard me say that. But yeah, even today is a big day for patient care for those who are, out there, and maybe it's not their day off recording a podcast, like in my case. But yeah.
Yeah. People, I always try to keep that in mind too, right? People that we serve alongside and our people are out there constantly, and so how is it that we prepare ourselves? They deserve leaders who are going to pour into them and help to the best of their abilities. And then from my standpoint, our leaders deserve a place and a space to debrief, as we will on this podcast, what's going on, how can we help, and also just to learn and share who we are. And the more we can get these stories of people like yourself out there, I think the more our listenership will feel like what is true, which is we are all a part of a beautiful community of diverse humans that want to play specific roles, and we need to learn how to support each other through that, whatever that might look like. So grateful for that. Is there anything
Well,
else
you
that you'd
mentioned
like? Oh, go ahead.
Well, yeah, you mentioned the support. Is there anything else that sure? What was really interesting, something that came up for me is how do we get these clinical managers to turn off their phones so that they can sleep from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. But I just wonder, like, what can we do? Is there what kind of structures do we have? Is there corporate guilt that we carry around that tells us we have to be accountable 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Because in my role, in the supervisor level role, shift specialty coordinator title, I'm not accountable 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I work my 3 shifts. I attend the meetings that are on my calendar. And then I am husband, father, stepfather, taxi driver, and to the 3 kids. And I'm sure that these clinical managers have families, have, parental responsibilities, step parental responsibilities where applicable, and have things to be doing between 5 p.m. and midnight. And then, their day starts over again, and their phone, I feel they are really tied to the workplace in a way that concerns me.
Yeah, you've really hit on a hot topic for all of us that have concern over the nurse manager role, the role regardless of title, that is 24/7 accountability for at least one department, and typically the leader of those in the unit, assistant manager, shift supervisor types of roles like what you're describing. How do you think those that are in roles such as yours can help support managers in that what you were just speaking of regarding comfort level? There's a multitude of reasons, right, that leaders are not comfortable, and I've been guilty of it myself. I've failed to provide support from director and CNO levels at times, even to make some real change in this with the managers' feelings of just like 24-hour accessibility, meaning 24-hour availability. And I don't know. I think I've also seen a variety of ways through which managers work with or organizations support those in supervisor roles in having an ability to even provide meaningful help and support by way of how these supervisor roles are structured. What do you do, or what do you value about that, or how do you think people can help from your corner of the world, managers maybe be comfortable taking a bit of time away?
I think we have to look at our culture, wherever you are, whatever organization, whatever region of the country you find yourself in, that there has to be something culturally going on that ties a clinical manager or any employee to their job for longer than they have to be. There's something culturally going on. And I don't know if this is something for a supervisor to reflect back on or to call out. Yeah, maybe it is. But, the health of our clinical managers is really going to reflect the culture and health of the unit, because oftentimes, like, especially our new graduates, they're not going to understand your corporate structure between clinical manager and CEO. And, but they understand that, I turn to my clinical manager when I want a schedule change, and I try to stop them, so that goes through me. Yeah, Stephen doesn't need to know the
You're right.
day-to-day minutes operation. He doesn't know what's on the assignment sheet. Don't text him with a sick call. Certainly, we're not going to know until it's way too late. But I don't know. There's something cultural that has to pivot, and I know that in the pandemic there was a move away from city centers to working from your laptop at home, right? I understand that, when we were doing the whole social distancing, but the show must go on type thing, and we can all work from home. Not so the case with nursing, but I feel like there has been an increased availability of that clinical manager role, especially that I can work from home. I do have a cell phone. I do have the company laptop, and I can jump on at 2:30 in the morning if something comes up. And for my money, and I don't think you'll disagree, it's like it depends on what that thing jumping up at 2:30 in the morning is. And I think we need to have a filter around that, and some boundaries. Maybe it's those who are in those roles just setting boundaries at whether it's interview or at quarterly follow-ups or at your annual review to whoever those folks report to, that I'm unavailable from 5 p.m. to midnight. And this place will not burn down, I promise you. I have leaders in place. I have charge nurses who are capable. There's a house supervisor 24 hours a day. There's a house officer on the medicine side. This place will be fine, right? And I think that, maybe it's that culture, boundaries,
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I mean, I think it's at least something for us to consider as you know, we both, I believe, can empathize with the situation of the clinical manager, and certainly so many of us are concerned and wanting to make whatever strides we can to help the individuals in these roles find a space of well-being, to help our leaders of these managers find a way to what is tangible, kind of transformational ideas related to this role. And then how do you actually really execute? And that is one piece that somehow it seems, and it's been a long time since I've worn a clinical manager hat. That's one reason I want to do this and talk to those of you who are still in these roles and who are finding ways to be successful or still have questions about how to be successful, that we can just have a dialogue about this together in community, because I want to learn and be able to provide support from whatever seats I can as well. And I think there is that piece of, hey, we've learned that we can be available. We text messages are a great way to say, oh, hey, if I send a text message to my leader at 2 a.m., I don't know that the staff or whomever's sending that technically want a response. However, I think what people don't always remember is that those leaders leave their phones on. There isn't really an ability to do kind of a do not disturb or whatnot, because if there is something, remember I used to always say, like, if we're going to be on the news, I need to be called, right? That was my way of saying, if it's a big deal, major patient safety event, things like that, then you do need to be able to call me, and I need to be accessible. And therefore, it is challenging as a leader to shut off my phone or put it on do not disturb, unless, of course, you have figured out a way that somebody might be covering for that for you. And some people have done that well, too. But I do think it comes down to all of us really being open to talking about it and saying, listen, for our teams, your schedule is important to us. Absolutely. That is not a priority piece of information that needs to be communicated, as you mentioned, to your manager, really ever directly. I mean, there can be emails, there can be different things, but not in ways that are going to disrupt the time away that they really, really need as well. I don't know. I don't have answers, but it sounds like, but I love that when there's roles structured as yours is, to serve even as a little bit of a buffer between those things for your leaders, so that not everything needs to really be escalated at that point. And your point about the fact that there's typically now, I have yet to be a part of an organization where they did not have some sort of house supervisor, house manager that's on 24/7, actually on site. You may not see me physically present here, but I'm working with the supervisors, and make sure this is true, right? Our supervisors, our house managers are here for you. And if you have a clinical emergency, here's what happens. If you have a scheduling issue you need to take care of for 2 weeks ahead of now, go to your shift supervisor or whoever that is first. And that is how we provide support to you, because I, manager, cannot be here, cannot be available to you 24/7. And I think people struggle. I struggle with, how do you still help people feel supported, right? And this, I am here for you. And here's how a leader takes care of their team. You do it by bringing on support and folks that will be there and making sure 24/7 there's somebody there and they know how to reach them, that is their go-to for all of these support pieces. And again, like I said, it gets complicated because every once in a while there is a circumstance that the manager needs to be made aware of. But I don't think it's to the extent that we see and hear about this nationally happening so much right now. It's distinctly different from when I was in those shoes, and I want to understand it better.
Likewise. Yeah.
Jay, this has been amazing. I'm so, so grateful to you for taking the time to be on the Nurse Leader Debrief and just share a little bit about your role. Is there any final thought or any takeaway that you might have for those that are serving in the supervisor roles that they could go and immediately maybe start doing? Or what do you want to leave our listeners with today?
Take time out for your own career development. Take time out. And it's tough out there. Take time out to go on vacation too.
Well, those are great pieces of advice, Jay. And I'm hopeful that we'll get another time to talk. We'll have you on the show again. This has been really great. I'm so proud of you and so grateful to you for stepping into this with me as well. And I look forward to continuing to watch not only your career, but your growth as a husband and a father and a stepfather and all of those things as well. And a fisherman, I might add. Jay, you take care. You have a wonderful, wonderful week, and say hi to everybody there for me, and we'll talk soon.